kind of can't wait until the lake, and we put the boat in the water in April, and every weekend from then until the end of October. Come Friday night, we pack up and we're here.
The heat in the city in the summertime is too much, so we really enjoy it. We're fortunate enough to come up here every summer.
It's nice and clean. It's a pretty lake, and I love it. I really love it.
Oh, perfect. I mean, the environment here. I like everything about it.
It's great. The water skiing, up canoes.
It's nice and quiet. The beat's going down towards the Cape for traffic and everything, and New Hampshire is just a wonderful state.
Not too many boats, so makes skiing and boat riding and flying super on it.
I enjoy it here. Besides, my brother-in-law owns the cabin. It doesn't cost me a thing.
Am I grateful to be here? Very grateful to be here. Very grateful to be here, yes.
This is a simple story. A story with few frills. It began when people recognized that a beautiful lake was dying. It ended, for our purposes, here, with the transformation of a primary sewage treatment plant into an advanced wastewater treatment facility. Perhaps there will be more to the story later, but for now, these are the bare facts, the start and the finish, or perhaps we should say, a beginning. But what came between then and now could well be a course in civics. It is a study in citizen action and reflects the tenacity of a group of determined people who wanted to make their world a little better. Lake Winnipesaukee is a natural, deep, cold-water lake of glacial origin. Located in the Lakes region of central New Hampshire, it is surrounded by the towns of Meredith, Sanbornton, and Belmont, as well as by the industrial city of Laconia. It is fed by 6 brooks, but the Winnipesaukee River contributes 95% of its inflow. In the summer, vacationers attracted by the swimming, fishing, and boating in this beautiful setting swell the area's population. Recreation is a major factor in the economy of this region. But not long ago, increasing amounts of partially treated sewage from the primary treatment plant in Laconia were being dumped into Lake Winnipesaukee. Additional wastewater from other sources around the lake added to the problem. This sewage fertilized the lake to the point that sudden and severe algae blooms would appear in the summer and early fall.
The tremendous numbers of algae that exist in the surface waters at the time of a bloom are short-lived plants. They die and fall to the bottom in a steady rain. And this, in turn, exerts a tremendous oxygen demand upon those bottom waters. And the eventual happening is that the bottom waters do run out of oxygen.
Sewage contains fertilizing elements, contains nitrogen and phosphorus, the same type of elements that farmers buy and put on the land to fertilize crops. The effective fertilizer going into Lake Winnipesaukee has been 20 years of nuisance algae, as the algae respond to the fertilizer the same way that land crops would if a farmer applied it to his land.
And we find that of all the tributaries to the lake, the 2 small discharges from the sewage treatment plants located on the shores of the lake are contributing maybe 0.03% of the total volume of water, yet they contribute about 2/3 of the total phosphorus input from all of the tributaries.
And there are times during the season that you just can't even go in swimming. And when we first started coming up here, it was lovely all summer long.
algae just comes in. It's like pea soup. You go out water skiing, it's brown. And a few years ago, there was about that much algae on the water.
I mean, 10 years ago, when she first bought the place, like that, it was like you could stand up to your chest and see your toes. Now you can't.
The problem on Lake Winnisquam became apparent to the residents around Winnisquam during the 1950s. It took the form of nuisance algae blooms that were very, very troublesome. The New Hampshire Water Supply and Pollution Control Commission got aboard on the problem, and in 1961, early 1962, funded a study by the Metcalf and Eddy engineers to try to determine what the cause of the problem was. It was a relatively low-cost study, and the funds were aborted after the study had just gotten underway. But the final report indicated that the nutrient load going into Lake Winnisquam, and by nutrients I mean phosphates and nitrate materials, was causing the algae bloom.
The history of the lake reveals that the sewage treatment plants are doing exactly at what they were designed to do. However, the nutrients, unfortunately, go right through primary and secondary treatment and are being discharged to the lake.
We bought in this particular area because the water was so clear, and it certainly has deteriorated since.
Before, if you went out, you wanted to go fishing in the water, you came back with a limit. Now you're lucky if you come back with anything now, really.
You know, I mean, the kids going into this green stuff, you don't know, what they're going to be catching from it.
At a time when algae or a bacteria count at Weirs Beach became very dangerously high, where they had to close the beach for 4 days, the city of Laconia, the officials, the mayor and council and business people at the Weirs began to feel the pinch of polluted water. Not until then did they get alarmed as to what was happening to our lakes. And it was as a result of that that the Chamber, which is Laconia-based, Chamber of Commerce, began to take it seriously, its directors and so on, and they formed what is now known as the Lakes Region Clean Water Association.
An advanced wastewater treatment plant is not a monument in the usual sense, but in an unusual sense, this one is. Not grand, not historic, not an attraction like the lake it serves. This plant is a monument to and a result of organization and sheer determination. And beyond that, it works. But several years ago, this plant was not here. The one that was, it was clear, was a major factor in the deterioration of Lake Winnisquam. But that had been evident for many years, and the primary plant was still operating. There was a need to overcome the inertia of years of inactivity, a need to get people together, to pressure officials, to seek funds, to seriously get started on the job of saving Lake Winnisquam.
You just cannot legislate algae to disappear. They won't do it. There's no way to do it. You've got to have a program established that is practicable, that is funded, and that is not overly hampered by administrative entanglements. Otherwise, you're a dead duck. You can forget it.
During the 60s, of course, the algae problem continued in the lake. The approach was more cosmetic than fundamental in eliminating the problem. When the algae bloom would occur, copper sulfate was doused into the lake rather liberally, and the algae bloom, for the most part, was put down.
When we doctor this lake with copper sulfate, it's in effect taking aspirins for a brain tumor. You're not approaching the basic cause of the problem.
Early in the 70s, the problem could not be resolved, at least as far as the residents were concerned, by additional copper sulfate treatments. People were demanding something more of a permanent nature, They really didn't know what approach to take, and they were looking toward the state agencies for a proper technical approach as to how to solve the problem. About that time, the contents of the 1962 Metcalf and Eddy study became fairly well known and widely read, indicting the Laconia sewage treatment plant as the principal cause for the nutrients in the lake. With that information in hand, the Water Supply and Pollution Control Commission was asked to ban any additional building construction, building permits, in the city of Laconia until such improvement could be made in the Laconia sewage treatment plant so that the plant would not be discharging the phosphates and nitrates into the lake that were causing the algae problem. The commission struggled with this. Obviously, this was a very serious request because it had to do with the economy, the economic viability of a large section of the population in Laconia. And I think from the real standpoint, the people that were concerned about the environment didn't fully believe that they would ever institute a ban on building. But it did bring the subject to issue.
The city of Laconia depends on the lakes for about 30% of its economy. We would be idiots if we did not do something about a problem that would deprive us of that return. What the average citizen does not know is the miles and miles of red tape and administrative setbacks that any program like this undergoes, including the lack of desire of the citizen himself at times to pay the freight.
We felt then that it had to be done through individual action. The individuals who had not only the problem, but who had real concerns had to really stand up and get counted in this issue. The first thing we did was to contact go in and see the city officials, let them know that we felt that they had a problem here in Laconia. After discussing it with the city officials, we went down and discussed the same thing with the state officials.
The other point that drove home the problem was the legal action that the three property owners associations had established. We were asking the courts for damages from the city of Laconia, damages resulting in the loss of value of properties around the lake as a result of the algae blooms. There was some precedent for this in the Keyser Lake situation, where the tax commission had granted the people of Keyser Lake, around the shores of Keyser Lake, a 30% reduction in tax base because of nuisance algae blooms on Keyser Lake. So the suit in law brought in the Belknap County Court concerned, and rightfully concerned, the mayor of Laconia and the city council. This was the first time that there was an appearance that it might cost Laconia money out of pocket for the damage that they were doing to the lake.
We felt that there was a need to do something, and we really went ahead and started promoting and telling and pointing up the problem publicly. We immediately started a newspaper campaign. Aside from the newspaper campaign, we began discussing our problems with our legislators, telling them, asking them to really help us out with especially the boards that were in charge of keeping the lakes clean.
We were at odds as far as the conservation groups were concerned with both the Water Supply and Pollution Control Commission. We were at odds with the city of Laconia. We were asking for things that both of those government bodies, I guess, considered impossible to grant.
Little do they realize the problems, the financial problems, the administrative problems that are involved. What they want to see is some brick and mortar
put in the ground almost instantaneously. Unfortunately, the facts of life are that between the concept of an idea and its implementation normally takes from 5 to 7 years. This is a very frustrating thing to people who want to see the lakes cleaned up and cleaned up right now.
We had conversations with the EPA, and we really went after federal funds. We felt that federal monies had to be involved in this problem, and we also discussed this very same thing with the state officials because it wasn't only the government that had to be involved, it was the state and the city people that had to cooperate in order to make this a reality.
At that time, an application was being prepared to obtain federal construction grants funds to help in the construction of a upgrading of a Laconia plant which discharges directly into Lake Winnipesaukee. However, after some meetings with local officials and state and other federal agencies, it soon became evident that this was a classic case where handling a project on an individual, isolated basis was not the solution.
Laconia was not the only city on the lake, and therefore if we tried to do something on our own, while there were about 5 other towns on the lake, why there was no point in one town doing something while the others sat dormant. So we decided then to broaden the scope of our activities, and we more or less invited about 18 towns that surrounded not only Lake Winnipesaukee, but also Lake Winnipesaukee, Lake Opeechee, Lake Paugus, and maybe a few people from the Squam Lakes area to a meeting in Meredith, New Hampshire. Here, these people got together, and it was a wonderful turnout. We were really surprised. Where we thought we would get only 10 people, about 85 people showed up. And it proved to us conclusively that people were concerned. They wanted to do something.
We started at that point in time to get some resolution of the problems. The Water Supply and Pollution Control Commission directed that the city of Laconia complete a study as to what to do about the problem, an engineering study. And Laconia was not only directed to complete this study, but to pay for it. And Laconia at that time, I think, was very happy to do this. The study was completed in December of 1971 and early 1972, and it was done by McGuire Associates. And this was a study that recommended a regional sewage treatment program, a regional sewage treatment concept to handle not only the city of Laconia, but 8 of the communities close to Laconia that were either tied into Laconia or presented potential pollution problems in the region.
And we devised and had a bill number 50 put through the legislature to tie in all the communities on the Lake Winnipesaukee, tie them in all into one pipeline so that all the effluent could be gone through the Laconia treatment plant, eventually go down and pick up all the effluent from the other towns, and in Franklin have one major plant to clean the effluent and then disperse it.
It's a strange anomaly that the state had previously attempted to gain enactment of similar legislation, but had failed to get it through committee. It died there, never got off the ground. And why? Because it had no support from the citizenry or the communities in the state of New Hampshire. We were very fortunate that the Lakes Region Clean Waters Association applied this concern and put their shoulder to the wheel so that we could get this legislation through. Even while the legislation was going through, even when it was enacted into law, we found another cropper. No one had appropriated any monies for the state to operate for the first year. So the city of Laconia put up the money so that the state could operate for the first year?
The state of New Hampshire, through their state legislature, actually created a state district, as shown by this boundary. And through this mechanism, the state, not the individual communities, is actually building and constructing this entire regional facility and will maintain and operate it.
You can do some very sophisticated treating in a large plant. Also, you can employ the people that you need to do it. A small municipal plant very seldom has the funding for the experts that you need to know how to operate these plants. And a plant is no more effective than the people who are operating it.
The initial phase will be to treat the Laconia sewage so that nutrients will be removed, therefore eliminating the eutrophication problem in Lake Winnipesaukee, which has resulted in severe algae blooms. But we know we have to go further. You cannot just look at the situation in an isolated manner. There are numerous other communities and resort areas all around this lake area which are presently contributing to pollution. In addition, the long-range effect is very serious. This is an area that is rapidly growing, and we know that these lakes are very, very sensitive. They're much more sensitive than rivers and ocean waters.
And as the population increases and there are more and more demands placed upon our waters, we have to be this much more cautious in what we dump into them and how we use or abuse the gift that we have of these magnificent lakes and streams.
We are embarking on a full environmental impact statement study at this time, which will look into the full range of implications of growth in the area, non-point source pollution, and other aspects that may harm the environment in the long range. In addition, we have recently funded what we call a 208 study under the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of the same district. This will be a long-range study which will also identify various other polluting factors and other serious environmental difficulties that should be evaluated. When these two studies are completed, here again it will be up to the local citizens groups, the towns, and the states to use these studies and reports to develop mechanisms to be certain that no pollution will be permitted to interfere with the use of these lake waters and the area.
When we started out, the lake was in a deplorable state.
This started out as a local citizens project, recognizing the problems that the lake was undergoing, identifying the old sewage treatment plant as a focal point of the problem, building up local support, going to the state level, and eventually to the Environmental Protection Agency. And here we have a sewage treatment plant which is going to have a measurable impact on the quality of water in Lake Winnipesaukee. In a larger sense, we're looking at part of a regional treatment sewage program which eventually, 4 or 5 years from now, will cover not only Laconia and Lake Winnipesaukee, but will cover 8 communities up and down the Lake Winnipesaukee, Lake Winnipesaukee watershed.
This may take 5 or 6 years to complete. The total cost is estimated in the vicinity of $55 million. This sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But it's well worth the effort, well worth the expense, because we're sure that through this plan and through this project development, we'll protect these waters and these resources for many, many generations to come. It has always been exceedingly difficult to get various municipalities to join together in a joint venture such as this. And I think we succeeded in this case because we had the most active and the most effective citizens group that we have ever come across, and that is the Lakes Region Clean Waters Association. Through their efforts, this project has succeeded.
As the lake begins to improve, we feel that the business here will increase because people will want to come to an area that has done something about its problem.
10 years from now, I'd like to see the lake back the way it was a few years back there, where you could go out here and catch a few lake trout and a few salmon in a week's time. Nice and clear, no more algae, and I'd like to see it real clear. That's what I'd like to see.
If you don't live in New England or New Hampshire, you've probably never heard of Lake Winnipesaukee. But that's not important. What is important is that this lake was not added to the long and growing list of lakes and rivers which are dead or dying. The reason that this lake is alive today is that a lot of people cared enough about it, for whatever reason, to save it. A small victory? Ask the people who enjoyed it 30 years ago. Better yet, come see for yourself. Ask the people who are enjoying it now.